Hello, my name is Joshua Nelson. Welcome to the Seek Community Podcast. Here we talk about dating, how people meet people, and building community. I want to talk about this porndemic going on right now. And I think it's fueled by loneliness. I've did a bit of research on this. And I also want to say too, I've anecdotally, I think I am an example of what's going on right now. I'm among those men who are alone most of the time and single and struggle with porn. I've would say that I stopped watching porn, but it's still tempting to watch it at times. I'm just being candid and open with you. It's kind of hard not to when, you desire to be with a woman, you're abstaining yourself from sex until marriage. So what do you do in the meantime? And porn satisfies that in a sense, but it's like a false satisfaction. It's a thirst that'll never be quenched. You'll never be satisfied. The flesh and the devil will never be satisfied. So that's something that I continue to struggle with, just to be candid with you. I struggle with pornography. And it's good for me to be open about that because even though I am a virgin and I'm saving myself for marriage, I still have struggles with lust, just like everybody else. And I've still sinned sexually, just like everybody else. So I'm just like you. Nothing about me makes me special, and I'm not trying to come off as though I'm better. But I formed this podcast because this is something that I want to talk about. And this is the core of this whole podcast, Seek Community. Because throughout my experiences, ever since I was like 17 when I became Christian, sexual sin has been a theme of my spiritual journey. Sexual sin has been a theme of my spiritual journey, just like finding and building community has. And I would say that has been pivotal to my spiritual growth. But I did some research into this, and basically Pew Research released a report showing over 60% of men reported that they were single. And basically most men are single and most women are not single. And men were more likely to be lonely and single, sexually dormant, and romantically uninvolved. We're also most likely to do mass shootings and to watch pornography and to commit suicide, to fall into video games. All of those pathologies stem from male loneliness, I think. And that's not empirical, but I just think it makes sense. If you're alone a lot of the time, if you feel shut out from society, I think it makes sense, right? When you look at male singleness and the stats, and when you look at who are the main perpetrators of a lot of these heinous crimes and all of these sexual assaults against women, I can bet you that it stems from male loneliness. So yes, it's definitely a lot of men who are struggling with this. Men, we're very visual. We're very horny most of the time. We can have sex with a bunch of women indiscriminately if we could. That's something I would want to do. I know I'm a Christian, but if I wasn't a Christian, I'd be sleeping around like crazy. And that's why I think a lot of us fall into porn, because it does take us on that ride of fulfilling our sexual fantasies, even though it is a counterfeit fulfillment. But there's an interesting quote that I want to read too from Fred Robinowitz. He's a psychologist and professor at the University of Redlands, and he studies masculinity. And I'm going to read the quote. It says, young men, quote, are watching a lot of social media. They're watching a lot of porn. And I think they're getting a lot of their needs met without having to go out. And I think that's starting to be a habit. And I said this in my last podcast. We have a lack of infrastructure that's not conducive to building community. It's keeping us in the home, and we're getting our sexual needs fulfilled at home. You've got OnlyFans. You've got all these girls pretending to be a girlfriend for you on the internet. You got girls who will text with you, just to pretend that they're your girlfriend. I mean, technology is getting so much better that it's simulating a sexual experience for men at home. So it's disincentivizing us to leave the house, and it's fueling this porndemic that's going on right now. I like that word, porndemic. I think there's a documentary called Porndemic, but I thought I coined that word, but had to look it up. I was like, no, somebody else got it. It was a documentary called Porndemic. It was about how HIV ravaged the porn community industry in California. I haven't seen it, but yes, we are living in a porndemic, and most men, we're the largest consumers of porn. I am among those men who watch porn, and I still struggle with porn. Again, I'm single. I'm alone a lot of the time. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily lonely. I mean, I tell myself that I'm lonely, but I'm really not lonely because I keep myself busy. I mean, I got a lot of stuff going on. I got, this podcast that I'm building up. I got filmmaking that I'm into. So I write movie scripts. I try to stay out the house most of the time. I go to the gym. I work out. Try to stay active. Try to get plugged in community. So I'm not necessarily lonely per se. I am alone a lot of the time, and I do have a lot of strong sexual desires naturally, as you do and as most people do. So it's tempting to watch pornography. I definitely haven't watched it though in a while. To be honest, I have not watched pornography in a while. And I really try not to watch it. I try not to watch it mainly because it just drains my energy, right? And I get it. It's sinful to watch it. It's bad, X, Y, and Z. I'm sure you get it. But watching porn actually drains me. And I don't like to be drained. I want to use my energy and channel it towards something. And I don't want to channel it watching porn. And also, too, one thing I notice is when I don't watch porn, I'm more driven to go talk to women, right? Like, that drive is there to go out and go talk to girls. I'm a huge proponent of cold approach. I think cold approaching is healthy and is good. I think most men should do it. And I mean, I've gotten to the point where I don't really care about rejection. I mean, especially if you asking a girl out and you'll never see her again. If it's a random girl at the mall, I strike up a conversation with her. I'm like, oh, smells good in this store. We have Bath and Body Works or something. I'm like, oh, it smells good in here. I like coming in here. And she says something too, and then we hit it off. Then, ask her for a number. Oh, sorry, I'm not interested. Okay, have a good one. I'll never see her again. So, honestly, that's why I'm a huge proponent of cold approach. But yes, porn drains me. So that's why I just practically don't watch it, because it drains me and it drains my energy. Just like masturbation does as well. Which I'll also talk about more in the future. But and watching porn is such a normal thing. Obviously, it's perpetuated in our culture. A lot of men, they'll be I think exposed to it a lot of the times. I think most men, they won't admit that they watch porn. There's definitely a guilt there. And it makes sense, right? Like, you're watching another man, bang a chick. Actually, there's a funny quote that I heard. A guy was like, just think about it. Like, how pathetic do you have to be to watch another guy have sex with a woman that you want? Think about that, of how beta male and weak that is. So instead of going out and getting the girl that you want, you're going to watch another man have sex with the girl that you want. I don't know where I heard this quote from or who said it. I forgot the origin of it, but it just really, that's also what, lit a light bulb in my head. Was like, it just made me feel more guilty in watching it, because I'm always one of those people where I go out and get something. I like to be the solution, not the complainer. So it's almost like I'm into movies and filmmaking. I'm sitting here watching all these movies, listening to all these directors and interviews and listening to their commentary and all that, watching the movies, criticizing it, but I'm not going out there and making movies. So that's why I was like, Josh, go out there and make a movie. Be what you want, be what you're always consuming. Produce, don't consume. And I think as men, we're supposed to produce, not consume. We can't get, and we can easily fall into that consuming cycle where we consume. We consume video games, we consume anime, we consume social media, we consume so much, right? And that's just as a whole, men and women. We, and especially in America, we're such a consumerist society. We're out there making other people rich, right? We're consuming on Amazon, we consume, but as men, especially, we're supposed to produce, not consume. So that's the thing. That quote about men watching another man have sex with the woman that he wants, that really it convicted me, and it made me feel more shameful on who I was as I'm watching porn, because I don't like to feel like a beta male, me personally. I like to be the one that go out there and go get it and go put a dent in the world. So yeah, I've approached a lot of girls, got rejected, got numbers sometimes, went on dates with cute girls, and even though it didn't work out, I'm still proud of the fact that I put myself out there, approached a girl, gave it a shot, and I did that instead of watching pornography that night. And maybe that may be a motivator for you. You might need to, go out and fail at something, and at least try, as opposed to just giving up and, falling into your non-productive habits. So yes, so Fred Ravenous, he says a lot of men were watching a lot of porn. And also too, a lot of the research I was looking into, it was talking about how just the dating marketplace is skewed. More women are earning a lot of bachelor's degrees. They don't really need men to take care of them. And also too, as women make more money, their pool of viable candidates shrink. Because if a woman is making like 80 grand a year, she's going to want to make a guy make she's going to want to make more. She's going to want a guy to make more than her. And that's just because of hypergamy. And hypergamy is basically a mating strategy where women, they want, well, not even just women, but it's a mating strategy in general where species, they prefer the superior mate. So they're superior physically, intellectually, and it's all to protect children, right? So if a woman is carrying your child, she wants to ensure that you're healthy and viable enough to lead, and for her and for you to take care of that child. So hypergamy actually makes sense. And the current circumstances right now, with women entering the workforce and making their own money, is definitely creating a dating marketplace where a lot of women are in relationships, or they're not choosing men. And then you have a lot of very few men, the men in the top percent, maybe 10% or whatever, are taking all the women, having sex with all the women, having relationships with all the women. But then there's a large majority of men that are being shut out. So the research that I was looking into was talking a lot about that, of how the current dating marketplace is leading to this culture of a decline in marriage and more incentives for people to just be hooking up. So less people are getting married. And then too, you got to factor in like a lot of people in general, especially young people. We're delaying child rearing and marriage, and we don't own homes, we rent. Whereas back in the day, it was you're a guy, you come out of high school, it's easier for you to get a job that could take care of a family. And actually, most women were looking for men to take care of them because it wasn't this huge drive for women to be going out and becoming a CEO at a company or anything. So you had a lot of traditional women back then in the sense that they were looking for men to take care of them. But the world has changed. So the research that I was looking into was very fascinating. It was very eye-opening. And obviously, since I'm a part of it, I can kind of see it because, again, I am alone and I am dating. So I've been on dates with a lot of girls, and you can kind of tell that they want to, you know, they don't want to be housewives. They don't want to uh, be submissive in a sense where they want the man to lead. They kind of want to take over. So you got to deal with a lot of that, especially if you're living in a city like New York City, DC, all the big market cities. This is just a totally different mentality. So yes, the dating marketplace is skewed. A lot of men are single, not in relationships. So it's, I think, fueling the widespread consumption of pornography that's very easily accessible. And also, too, I want to talk about just how much the porn industry makes. The porn industry generates $15 billion, 15 to 97 billion a year, according to a stat I found in Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is like an accountability service that helps Christian men or men in general abstain from pornography. So it'll create filters in your internet use so you don't, stumble upon a porn site or anything. So yes, it's definitely a huge industry. 1 in 5 mobile searches are porn. There was also a stat in Covenant Eyes where like over 60% of men reported watching porn. I forgot the stat for women, and I'm sure women struggle with porn as well. I don't want to make it seem like I'm only speaking to men here, even though men tend to be the largest consumers of it because we're very visual and sex can just be reduced to a pleasurable thing to us. We don't really need any emotions attached to it. And I'll say that I know I'm a virgin. I've never had sex, but I mean, I can imagine, right? And a lot of my guys can affirm that. They'll tell me all the time. So I don't want to act like I know what I'm talking about when I talk about sex in that sense. But so yes, that's definitely an issue. This pornographic society we're living in, and two, the lack of infrastructure that I talked about in the last episode. How it's a lot of reasons to stay in the house. You got remote work, you got all these modern conveniences like delivery apps, streaming services. You don't really need to go anywhere. I didn't talk about this in the last episode, but the death of the third place. The third place, that's a concept of where do you go in between work and home. The library, do you go there? Not many people go to the library. As people go to the gym. But the gym has kind of become more of a people go in and out. I mean, people go to socialize sometimes, depending on the gym. That's one thing I noticed. I've been to a lot of gyms. It depends on the gym. You can do a lot of classes there. You can meet people at the gym when you do classes and stuff. So I guess it depends on your training regimen. But to me, the gym can be hit or miss. I mean, the gym I was at in Nashville, Quantum, was very social. I'd show up and, everyone's there. It's kind of, like a social club, which was cool. So the gym really helped me a lot in terms of helping me abstain from pornography and just from my singleness and my sense of loneliness in general. Like the gym was a huge driving factor for me because, not only am I leaving the house, but I'm also, you know, being productive in a sense and I'm building my body and I can see the results. And then, I'll potentially meet people too at the gym. But the gym can still be hit or miss because I do think people, for the most part, they go and they kind of just like, get in, get out, especially with girls. They're already sweaty. They ain't really trying to entertain you when they're already looking yucky, right? So, but, the gym is hit or miss, I would say. But yes, the death of the third place, I mean, that's definitely a fascinating concept. Because back in the day, the third place, there was a lot of third places available. A lot of people use the library, but now you got Kindle, you got a lot of electronic services where you don't need to go to the library anymore. But a lot of people used to go to the library, and a lot of people used to, I would just say generally, go to the arcade, but that's dying. Maybe go to like video stores, maybe go to, you had a lot of clubs back then. I think the primary third place now, I would say, are bars, right? Bars is where most people go to meet people. But what if you don't drink? Bars and clubs, that's definitely a very carnal activity, right? Are you going to meet your wife at a club or a bar? But it's kind of what people go to because it's all that they have. So they just resort to going to bars and clubs, which I think is sad. But yes, there's a lot of factors that's keeping us in the house. So you can't, it's no surprise that a lot of men are watching pornography. There's no surprise that there is a porndemic. There's no surprise that, over 80% of men are watching porn. It's such a accessible medium now. So yes, it's definitely a conversation that we need to start having more. How do we foster ways to meet people? How do we restore third places? How do we get people out of the house? It would be cool if the library was where remote workers met, right? But no. So that's a very fascinating quote from Fred Rabinowitz. Young men are watching a lot of social media. They're watching a lot of porn. I think they're getting a lot of their needs met without having to go out. And it's starting to be a habit. But I also want to talk about, too, Voodoo Baucham. He talks about pornographic culture, which is a very, very compelling argument he makes. And it makes a lot of sense, where he talks about, we live in a pornographic culture, so it's not just porn that we've all fallen victim to. It's the whole culture of it. So that's what's shown to us in media, maybe in books, the way people dress. A lot of it is pornographic. So yeah, there's this whole conversation about, like, the way someone dresses. Does that tempt you? I mean, I kind of get it, right? Like, I get it, right? Like, a lot of people say, like, oh, like, if a girl dresses this way, it's her fault. It's not the man's fault that he was, tempted sexually. That whole conversation, to me, I do think it's all an outflow of heart posture. Men will sexualize anything. Women will sexualize anything. It doesn't matter what anyone wears. But that's just beside the point. I tend to ramble and go on tangents. Sorry, guys. But basically, Voodoo Baucham was talking about, in order to get to the root of the pornographic culture, we have to acknowledge that we've become desensitized to it. So for me, if I'm scrolling through TikTok and I'm looking at all these girls, in these videos, and they may not be blatantly having sex on screen, but they could be doing something else that I'm sexualizing. If I'm desensitized to that, then I won't realize that that's what's harming me. I thought that was a really fascinating notion that he brought up, is that even the small things, the cartoons that we watch, or all the subtle ways that we have programmed ourselves to become comfortable with pornographic content. So it's not just porn, people having penetrative sex. It's literally everything else that we have to start being conscious of and fighting against. because that's what's fueling our drive to watch pornography. That's what's fueling our lustful thoughts. So Voddie Baucham definitely, he had a really good point when he talked about that. So what are we bothered by? What bothers us when we're looking at something? You know, even as something that's not blatant sexual activity. So that's definitely something to talk about as well. And I talked about this before. You know, I was exposed to porn at a young age. And even though I've never had sex, I've always struggled with lust because of that. And that's driven me to do things that I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing. For example, I would go to these parties in the hood, and I talked about this before, and it would get nasty. You know, it's blatant, like dry humping, and you know, you got this rap music playing, we all grinding on each other. And I go to these parties by myself, and I'm getting twerked on, and sometimes I go with my friends too. But the sad thing about it was that those parties were the only place that us young people in Detroit would think to go to meet people and hang out. Because it was fun going to those parties. It was very fun. And that's what I think helped me rationalize going was it's not like everyone was going to the library or people were going to the museum or people were going to, um, I don't know, arts and crafts event at a recreational center or something. No one in the crowd was doing that. The cool and popular thing to do was to go to these parties and to drop hump each other, basically. And you got all this music playing, the most demonic, sexually explicit music. But then again, it was fun, right? So, and that's how I met people. That's how I talked to girls, and that was the only place that everyone would go to, right? Nobody in Detroit was really thinking about going anywhere else. At least in my community, no one was thinking of doing that. So that's the thing. Because of my habits in watching pornography, me going to those parties, I was able to, it just felt normal to go, and it felt like it was just a normal thing that I would do. I never really felt um wrong doing it until I got delivered by it and I got saved and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Then I started to feel more convicted by it. But I would say even though after that, like I would say my freshman and sophomore year in college when I was in Tallahassee, I was still going to clubs and dancing with girls. Was still doing that. But fortunately I was surrounded by the right people and I eventually put that to death. But I'll never forget, there was a moment where like I'm in this club and somewhere, I think it was a nightclub in Tallahassee, and I'm walking around, I'm sweaty, I'm drenched, I'm disgusting. And like, everyone's dancing and all that and grinding on each other. And I'm like walking around looking for a girl to dance with. I just felt so like it just felt so just pathetic and just nasty. I'm like just walking around like just prowling, looking for somebody to dance with, you know. Who gonna twerk on me right now? Like, I don't know. It just felt pathetic to me. Even though I knew it was sinful to do and I was still doing, but I still felt pathetic doing it. That I'm just walking around looking for a girl to dance with, all sweaty and stuff, and then it was just one of those moments that hit me that I'll never forget. That was the last time that I like stopped going. I was like, yeah, I'm done. But yes, Voddie Baucham makes a salient point when he talks about the pornographic culture we live in and how we're desensitized to it. And once we acknowledge that we're desensitized to it, that's when we can better be better equipped to fight it and to tackle it. Because I'll tell you this, porn definitely affected my dating practices and it affected my habits because even it affected the way I dated. So yes, it did affect me going to those parties and, dancing and getting twerked on by girls and basically simulating sex. But it also affected my dating life. Like there were certain girls I just wouldn't be interested in because they didn't fit the mold of what I wanted and what my sexual fantasies were. And that's what porn, that's how it corrupted me, was that I had one narrow view of what I wanted a girl to look like. Like she had to look like this. So I was just purely corrupted in that sense. And I probably could have found somebody by now. Like I'm 30 years old now, I'm still single. There may have been girls that would have been great wives to me if I didn't filter them out because they didn't look a certain way. So I would say porn affected me because it made me prioritize the looks in the woman. And that's very detrimental. And also, we don't want porn. We don't want to bring that into our marriage life, and we don't want our kids to be affected by it. So too, with pornography, the reason why I'm really trying to hammer it down now is because one thing people tell me all the time, and married couples tell me this, is that your porn urges aren't going to go away once you get married. A lot of us Christians, we think, oh, just, as soon as we get married, it'll all just go away. Oh, I got somebody to have sex with now. I got a girl to, put my semen in. So I'm no longer going to have the urge to watch porn. But a lot of married couples tell me like, no, it actually gets worse. So while you're single right now, you need to be killing that sin off. Fight it off. So yes, God called us to be greater. And I get it. It's hard. You got those urges. It's natural. You want to have sex. You have these fantasies. You have these thoughts. So what do? Yeah, it's because it's not going away. And I really like this is a book I read, Wild at Heart. Well, I read a few pages of it. I actually lost it, unfortunately. But I kind of get where it was going at though. And he's basically talking about how men, we have a three desires. We want a beauty to rescue, a battle to fight, and an adventure to live. So porn fulfills that beauty to rescue component because it's like a counterfeit pleasure, right? It's telling us like, yes, this is fulfilling that need to get the girl and to slay the dragon, get that beautiful woman, but it's like a cheat code watching pornography. We're getting fulfilled in such a backwards counterproductive way. So, and also too, I mean, men, we fall into video games and that comes to the whole, adventure to live component, right? A battle to fight too, that's why a lot of us men, we like to, we're very assertive. We like to conquer and dominate. We literally fight, like literally we like to fight. But we like to go after what we want. And that's why I think it's so going back to that quote that I was talking about earlier, how when you watch pornography, you're watching another man have sex with a girl that you want. That's so counter to what we are as men. God designed us to be greater than that. He designed us greater to be greater than watching another man get what we want. We're not supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to produce, not consume. We're producers. We build. As men, we build the castle so the girl can move in. We're not spectators. We don't just watch and watch other men get what we want. That's not how we are. But I would think porn fuels that. So what do you do in the meantime? And, I wrote some notes. That's what I'm looking. I'm looking at the notes that I wrote so I can stay on track and not just ramble. But one of the quotes that really stuck to me is singleness is not something to survive, it's something to thrive. And that's really been my mantra during my singleness because it is hard. Guys, it's hard. You being alone a lot of the time, you're looking at everyone else on social media. I just stopped scrolling through social media because I just got tired of looking at everybody else get married. I want what he have. I want a beautiful wife. I want children. But it's all God's timing, right? So what do you do in the meantime? So another one of my biggest mantras is actually a scripture. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all will be added unto you. So during my singleness, I've tried everything. I've, traveled everywhere I wanted to travel so far. I still need to do more traveling. But I've also found a passion, something I love to do. And one thing I will say during my singleness that I've achieved that I'm proud of, that I will definitely hold me to my deathbed is I found a job that I love to do. Like I wake up every morning loving what I do. I work in journalism, dream job. I love it. And it took me a good 7 years to build a career and to get where I'm at. So, and that's the thing about singleness, because of I am single, I have a lot of time. So with that time, again, I'm free to do a lot of what I love, right? Like watch movies, go to the movies every weekend. I go by myself a lot. I go see movies and also make movies. Like literally, I make movies. I made a few short films. I made a short film that got into two short films that got into film festivals. I got nominations for the actors. And I got some actors in my short films that won awards. I've won the Best Editing Award at the Sundance Film Festival. It was a program within the purview of the Sundance Film Festival. It wasn't given by the Sundance Film Festival, but it was called the Creative Minds Group. So I've done everything so far that is what I love to do, and I'm trying to maximize my singleness as best as I can. And I encourage you to do that as well. Because we're not going to be single forever. Because I know for sure, once I start having a family, I'm just not going to have as much time as I do now, and I'm going to regret it. I'm going to be like, dang, man. While I had all this time, I could have finished my feature film and made a feature film, which is definitely an endeavor. I could have did this. I could have done that. I could have traveled here, traveled there. So while I'm single, I'm literally getting it all out of my system. Like I'm eating out late, buying whatever I want to buy. I'm being fiscally responsible, of course, but you get what I mean. Like I'm literally doing everything I want now because once I get married and have a family, that's all is going down the drain. But also, too, first and foremost, in my singleness, and this is something I found and discovered recently, is I'm pursuing my calling by God to preach the gospel and to talk about what I'm talking about now. And that's really the impetus behind this whole conversation in this podcast, is that I want this podcast to be a platform where I get to talk about these issues of men falling into porn addiction, singleness, dating culture, how people meet people, death of the third place, all these things. I want to talk about all this because I truly believe that I can spread the gospel through these conversations and I can build a community and get people to talk about them with me. Because I have a huge vision for this podcast, guys. Trust me, like this is going to be a lot bigger than what you're seeing now. Like I have like a vision of what I want it to be. I'm going to create a whole brand and I want to do documentaries that, that get into the dark elements of the porn industry. I want to do a documentary on how people meet people. I think that's a fascinating conversation because there aren't a lot of avenues for us to meet people. Like social connection is dying. Like we're living in a society where there's a lot of digital connection, but we're all not connected. And, I saw some stats too where, DC, Washington, DC, and New York are one of the loneliest cities. How is that possible? And these are large metropolitan meccas. Yet they have a loneliness epidemic in these cities. That's fascinating to me. And I do think remote work plays a part in that. But yes, I want to do a documentary on this. How do people meet people? Look out for that documentary. How do people meet people? But I want to touch on too, again, and I think this has been watered down a lot, but church has been very instrumental for me in my spiritual growth. Just something as simple as going to church. And I think church, it's been watered down so much, I think, because it's normal in Western culture, in Western society, in North America, and in Europe. People go to church, right? You got a lot of people who aren't Christian who go to church. You got a lot of people who claim to be Christian, but aren't Christian that go to church. And it's such a normal thing, and it's been reduced to just the Sunday thing. But I really want to speak to how church has shaped me ever since I became a Christian and has been so pivotal in my spiritual journey. And I think that that can be understated because it's so obvious, right? The people are like, well, of course, church. But I would want to explain that church has been important for me because I've been exposed to the right people and the right experiences. And it started with my godparents. I've talked about this before, how we were just having those conversations about sin and how I felt convicted by that. Just the idea how I could be held accountable for what I do while I'm living and conscious. That to me was something that stayed with me forever. Like, I'm going to be held accountable for this. So when I die in the afterlife, I'm going to be held accountable for what I did. Then also my goddad talking about sexual purity with me and how that basically led me to the faith, because now I'm starting to get a glimpse of eternity and heaven um by having a relationship with Christ through preserving my sexual purity and developing a prayer life and getting closer and intimate with God, as opposed to just sleeping around and having false senses of intimacy and counterfeit pleasure and counterfeit intimacy. I get to channel that with the Lord in a relationship. And trust me, guys, it's been a long time coming. It took me a good 10 years for me to really start getting disciplined with, a prayer life or reading the Bible. And, I do this daily walk Bible, but that's definitely a work in progress for sure. But yes, church has been very pivotal for my spiritual journey. Also in Tallahassee, I've talked a lot about that before, and meeting the dean of the film school at Florida State. And I was able to see a very godly marriage operate. And I saw this in my godparents as well. Because where I'm from in Detroit, there just aren't a lot of good models of that. There's a lot of divorce, a lot of infidelity, a lot of people going to the club and getting twerked on. You just don't have that sense of people taking marriage seriously. And I'll share this again too. I'll never forget when the whole concept of boundaries was shown to me. When I'm talking to the dean of the film school at Florida State, they would drive me to church every Sunday, but he's like, I can't make it this Sunday because something happened. I forget. I say, oh, well, your wife can take me. He's like, oh, no, sorry. She won't be able to take you. And then I said, why? He said, because we don't drive with the opposite sex alone in the car. I was like, interesting. And again, I saw them as, family. Like, I saw them as parents. So it's like, I'm not trying to sleep with your wife. I mean, she's some middle-aged white woman. But that to me was good for me to see, because I got to see how serious marriage is and how tempted and weak the flesh is, and how you literally have to be proactive in fighting off sexual sin. Because who's to say she could ride with a guy and get some sort of emotional connection to him? And even that, in a sense, could be infidelity, right? You're having an emotional connection with someone outside of the opposite sex while you're married and you're alone. So to see people take that seriously, to see people fight against the flesh like that, was something the Lord wanted me to see. And it was something I was exposed to in church. That's why church was so important. Another example is in Nashville, Tennessee, where, again, I find this men's Bible study, and everyone's around my age. And through that, you get to hear a lot of men's stories and their testimonies. And you start to realize you're not the only one that's struggling with porn and loneliness. You're not the only one that's in this predicament. And that's so relieving, and is so stimulating and motivating to be around, because in a way, we tend to victimize ourselves and to act like we're the only ones, but we're not. So yes, in Nashville, I found a brotherhood, and those are relationships I'll keep forever. And those are relationships that I'll need. And just my other good friend the other day, he just got engaged. And I remember going to church with him, and we were both single, and it was kind of awkward how we were like the single guys, but it's good to see the Lord bless a servant who was dutiful and disciplined and was patient. And now he's getting married. I mean, he's getting married. So the church is I think it's been so watered down, but it's so important. You can't do this alone. You're not going to be able to fight against sexual sin alone. You're not going to be able to fight against anything alone. You need Christian brothers and sisters to hold you accountable and lift you up and to build you up. And why I left Nashville is definitely it's ironic, right? A lot of people were surprised by it because I'm in Detroit now. But I did end up leaving Nashville was because I was looking for fulfillment in other things. I was still figuring stuff out. But now that I have this podcast, I found my groove and I found something that I can build. And I want this podcast to be an anchor in Detroit. Like I want to be a Detroit-based voice that's showing people the power of Christ through my story and my testimony, but also giving people a platform to talk about their experiences and their testimony, and to foster a community where we all do the same and build each other up. So I do miss Nashville. It's sad that I left, but I was yearning for something, and it was a time in my life where I hadn't really figured out what my calling was and who I wanted to be. So I just needed a change of scenery, and I ended up coming home. But this podcast is going to be great, and just stay tuned for more episodes, and I'll get more deeper into these topics. Thank you for tuning in, and looking forward to hear from you in the comments. Stay tuned for the next episode. All right.